Now you can see all the pock marks here from the rain. This is telling us that there was mud here earlier. It's gotten pretty warm today, so the mud's dried up before we got here. But it left a little imprint. If I can just pull this piece of grass out, there's a little herb here. Bend it down so you can see some kick up. And this is something you got to be aware of. You're not just looking for tracks. Just like we looked at the food sources and we looked at all the little resting sites, we're looking for things that they may have kicked up and moved out of place. These were not here before. You can see all the dirt piled up here. The animal kicked it back. Now if you look carefully enough, you'll see this big sausage square-like shape and then a little tapered piece here. Now if you're really aware, you might not be able to see this on the camera, there's another one right here. There's a little bit of a claw mark right there. This doesn't have any webbing marks, which would have been left in the mud as it was down here where we were looking at raccoon tracks earlier. You'll see the very details. This one is leaving no sign of any kind of webbing. And if I look just very carefully back here, I can see a little claw mark, I think, right there. It's really hard to see it. Could be, it might not be. You don't want to always just instantly judge and say that's what it is, because that's often where you're going to end up being wrong. There's a little hole here from where it looks like it pecked in. It could have just also been a claw mark. This is the toe of a bird. That's the claw, and that's the finger, or the toe piece, the pad. That is telling us one thing. First off, it's a bird. We know that now. Secondly, it's a big bird. If that's where one claw is and that's where one toe is, and that's the tip to the tip, that's a good sized bird. That's approximately 4.5 inches from one side to the other. That's a good sized bird. This bird has no webbing in between its toes from what we can tell. And it's got a good size to it. So it's a big bird and it's not a wading bird. And it's got big muscular structure, almost like human fingers. It's almost as wide as my finger. So it's muscular, which tells me it's a walking bird. It's not a flying bird. So this isn't an eagle. This isn't a heron. This isn't a crane. It's not a duck or a goose. This is more likely than anything else that I've seen out here to identify it. I've been looking around for other tracks and I haven't seen them. This is almost a giveaway, seeing as all those things put together, that this is wild turkey. This area's got a lot of variety, first off, with plants. We've got a lot of alders, we've got a lot of beech trees, got a lot of the conifers, of course the younger willows. We also got a lot of wood lilies, some jewelweed, poison ivy over here, colt's foot, a lot of variety of plants. And then of course we get into the grasses in here, and the smaller herbs. And of course, getting into the actual geography of the area, we've got a marsh right over there, with the cicadas blowing away at me behind me. Marsh over there, a big hill behind me. So we've got a lot of different features. Here we've got a lot of mud. With all the mud, that's encouraging beautiful tracks that can be left behind for us to study. And before we show anything else, we have deer tracks right here, deer tracks going towards the camera, deer tracks all the way around this mud. Just a beautiful site to come in and examine. When you find a site like this, you are in prime tracking real estate. We got a special track in this mud. I'm going to try and keep my shoulder out of the light. This is it right here. It's got a round pad. It doesn't have lobes, which are the big bases of what looks like a coyote or a dog track or a wildcat track. Has 3 lobes. This has no real lobes you can really see. But it's got a very clear pad, much like a human hand. It's got this just simple, very basic round shape to it. It's got a very thick finger or toe. Another toe, another toe, another toe. Looks like another toe right up here, so about 5 toes. And one of them is a little bigger than the others. It almost looks like an opposable thumb. Their long toes are starting here and going all the way up to here. For such a small track, that's over half the length of the track. A lot like a human hand. What this animal is a raccoon, and they have hands much like a human's. And they can actually grasp onto things, not as easily as a human can. They can't do this. They're not as functional fingers. But they can grasp onto things, pry things, move things with their hands, much like a human or an ape can. And that makes them an amazing animal for living in the wild and in cities. They're one of the best survivors you'll find out there. This animal was coming through here. We haven't found much of his other tracks through this trail. But from the angle it's coming in at, he was going along skirting the marsh, the marshier areas. He was coming in looking for snacks, most likely. These guys love frogs, they love crayfish, they love mussels, they love aquatic food, and they wash their food. It's something that's seen with both wild and domestic raccoons. They'll wash their food. It's not as much hygienic as they think as people think they're now believing it might just be a habit they do to soften the food up. And of course, that's where they're going into the water and getting their food. So their hands are often wet while they grab food, so it's a psychological aspect of the animal. We were coming back from the beaver den. We decided to do a little bit of a sidetrack into one of the older, lesser used trails. Up here where we're tracking, there's a lot of ATV activity, so we wanted to go into an area where the ATVs haven't frequented lately. And we were lucky for that. We haven't seen too many tracks on the way up, but we've seen quite a few in here. In fact, right here, a deer came through this morning. I know it was this morning because there's not a lot of rain pock marks inside as there has been around everywhere else. Secondly, it's very fresh looking. It looks very clear. It looks like it's only happened, if I compare it with my own fingertip stuck in the mud, my fingertip looks almost identical, which tells me that it's been within a few hours. And it's only around noon right now, so I would say it happened sometime this morning. And knowing deer activity somewhere around right at dawn and just past dawn, that's more likely when they were active in here. The first track is right here on the other side of this log. And this one is actually a skid. You see he started here and he skidded in the mud up to here. And it's not like he slipped or anything, he just pushed in and he got a grip. The next step is right up here. And this track, well, this one here, is about that long, including the skid. I compare that to this one, it's only that long. It's half the length. So this one is the actual, or closer to the actual size of the deer. If I place my fingers down in here, both of them, my middle finger and my index, I can go all the way down to the very bottom. And I can see how deep this track actually is, which is way down. If I stick my knuckle in here, the wet area on my finger stops here. So that's actually quite a good sized deer. That's probably a young buck or a young doe, maybe an older doe. That's a beautiful set, and we know it's a deer track because of the length of the legs, and secondly, the two hoof toes. It's not, this one could be easily confused. It's a heart shape, which often looks like the heel pad of a coyote, so it can often be confused. But this one is definitely in sequence with this one, and in sequence with the next one that's beyond this log. Now, in the eyes of a naturalist, this is beautiful. It's telling me the size of the animal's stride. These are probably from the same hind leg. Boom, boom. That tells me that's how far he steps apart. So the next one set up from that measurement, it can tell me he would step right around here. In fact, I think I just found the other track right here. The next one would be about the same length again there. This is telling me the size of the animal. This is telling me the weight of the animal, how deep it's pushing into the mud. If I compare it with my weight, he's not as heavy as I am, of course, but he's very similar in weight, balancing on his one hoof compared to me balancing on my one finger. That's telling me a lot about the weight of the animal. It's telling me a lot about the size of the animal. So as a naturalist, this is a really good sign. But as a hunter-gatherer and a trapper, this is telling me a lot about what I can set up for my next ambush. First off, I know the animal was here today. From the older tracks we're seeing, there's a return trail here. It's just as fresh. Most likely he came through browsing, turned around somewhere up there and came back browsing. So, you hear that osprey going off. In here we now know that this is a frequented trail by deer. That alone is impressive. That tells us something as a hunter-gatherer. Secondly, and more importantly in my opinion, with these logs here, I had the chance of setting a trap. If I set a treadle snare down in the mud, just low enough that he's not going to notice it, and I see this is where they frequent the most. This is where the most activity on this entire mud path is. It's right in here. So I could set an ambush trap here and an ambush trap here. Just a simple treadle snare trigger down there. And I could have a snare attached to one of these alders that could be bent down as a bent pole trigger, set off, and pin it around its leg. This isn't going to catch and kill the animal. It's just going to pin it in one place so it's not going to escape. It's my job as the hunter-gatherer and the trapper to come in here and be humane and put the animal out before it's stressed too much. This, you can see the animal stepped over this way, and he stepped over, other track is right there, stepped over that way. He's stepping over this. That is a great sign. I can encourage that by having the animal step over right into a trap set right here. And again, if he's on the return, I can set that exact same trap right here. And if I'm lucky, he'll step right over and hit it. And if I'm unlucky, he'll step in the one in front and I'm still catching. So as a hunter-gatherer, this is a great sight. This means food, and a lot of it. Transfer is another part of tracking you need to look at. Sometimes you won't see an imprint in the mud, But you will see something like this. Now this could be mud like that, muddy water like that, or even clearish water sprinkled on just by something sloshing around. It could be coming off the hair of the animal, the pad of the foot, could be coming from when they were drinking. It could be a lot of different things. It's this high up, it's unlikely that's going to be something just from the waves of the water moving back and forth, which you're only going to get to here. To get it way up here, this water would have to splash a lot. So this is clearly from something that was a faunal feature, something from an animal. Another thing about this rock is it's right in the middle of a trail. And it's barren right now, but often you'll see on trails foxes, squirrel, a lot of animals, especially in the mammal family, they're territorial. And a marker like this out in the middle of a trail where they can leave their fecal matter or their urine, it's a very clear indicator to other animals around them that this is their turf. So often when you're walking trails, you'll notice on high rises in the dirt, such as the middle of the rut of where an ATV went through, up on a rock, on a log, even up on roots of trees, that's where you'll often find fecal matter, such as scat, animal poop, for lack of any other better term.